Dandavat Pranam devotees. Guruve Gaura Chanjaya Radhika Tadale Krishna Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vancha Kalapatru Vishya Kripa Sindhuve Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Shri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I hope this is working. I was just on my other iPad and I was trying to answer a couple of questions that I received to my inbox. And what happens is sometimes so many different questions come and it's just a great deal of endeavor typing back on the messenger so many answers. So sometimes it's easier to just record answers doing this Facebook Live. It's just easier for me to speak the answers. And also, sometimes any very senior devotees, I was trying to do it on the other iPad, and Pujapad Radhamti Maharaj came on. So in this way, also I can be corrected, or there can be correction if I'm making any mistake or anything. So I appreciate being able to do it like this because of opportunities like that. So there were a couple of questions, but I'm only going to deal with one because I have another class shortly. So I wanted to address a question that was asked in the inbox, and that was about the nature of free will. In particular, free will as it relates to the jiva being able to misuse their free will, especially give rise to a feeling like envy in the spiritual world, and as a result of that fall to the material world. So I'm hoping this is working because the other iPad wasn't working and I didn't know how to correct it. So, and hopefully Maharaj may come back, because then if I make any mistake, or any senior devotees here, they can also correct any mistakes that I might make in this regard. What I've understood from Guru, Sadhu and Sastra, that free will is a essential ingredient in the samagri. Samagri means like in the mixture of love for God. So essentially, free will is not completely independent in the jiva. In other words, the jivas aren't like Bhagavan. The very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam mentions clearly that Bhagavan is Swarat. It means he's completely independent, and therefore his use of his will is independent. The free will in the jiva is very anutta, means very minute, and therefore it does not give rise to absolute independent use. Rather, the free will in the jiva operates under influence. That influence can be of two types. One is it can be influenced by the superior Shakti of Bhagavan, Swarup Shakti of Bhagavan. Para Shakti means the spiritual energy, or the Apara Shakti, Avidya, or Bahiranga Shakti, or the material energy. So the jiva's free will operates under influence of one of these two energies. It is not completely independent. If the jiva is situated in the spiritual realm, which means that the jiva is then under the influence of the Parashakti, Swarup Shakti, Sandini, Aladini, Sangbit, it is not possible for an independent genesis of a emotion that's not part of the spiritual world to arise in the jiva. So, for instance, a feeling like envy, that feeling of envy is a material feeling, right? So that feeling of envy could not enter into the spiritual domain. Damna Swena Sada Nirastam Kuhakam. The very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam says that the eternal abode of Bhagavan is forever free Kuhaka means from illusion. Illusion extended means all of the categories of illusion, like Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, right? Including Matsarya, which means envy. So there is no material envy in the spiritual world. So you could not have the genesis or any kind of original causation of that feeling to rise in the jiva. So the question then comes, well, wait, Mukunda, because very clearly many of our contemporary acharyas, beginning Bhaktivinoda Thakur coming down, has clearly mentioned that the jiva has become Vaimukata or Bahirmukh, right, to Krishna, and it's due to envy of Krishna. So here, again, it's important to understand the motive and intent of the acharyas. They have spoken in such a way to create an impression in the heart of the jiva of one, their original and constitutional relationship with Bhagavan. Jiva Goswami Pad is clearly written, Dasya Bhukti Hari Eva, Nanyasha Eva Karachan. The jiva is eternally a servant of Krishna and can never truly be a servant of anything else. Also, Mahaprabhu, when he answered the questions of Sri Sanatana Goswami Pad, Keami, Kenamaya Jarita Patra, he mentioned, Jivera Sarup Hoye Krishna Nityadas. And the reason that you're suffering, Jivera Tatasta Shakti Beda Be Prakash. Right? So, to create the sense of the constitutional relationship of the jiva to Sri Krishna, the acharyas speak in a narrative of a relationship that has been broken by some means. This is simplifying the facts in order to help us, first of all, get a sense of urgency to pick up the practice of reviving that relationship, and two, to realize the relationship to be intrinsic or natural. It's not something foreign. So in order to generate that feeling in the jiva, the acharyas have spoken like this. But as a matter of fact, it is not the case. We have no historical arrangement where being in the presence of Sri Krishna in the eternal abode, that a genesis of ill feelings of any sort, especially envy, arose, and because of that, we turned away from Krishna and then came to the material world. First of all, there's just too many statements that the jiva's relationship with the material world is anadikal. It means from a time without any beginning. Like sometimes it's translated as time immemorial. Again, even that translation of anadikal is to help the jiva understand that, well, it's not like you don't have any relationship with Krishna at all, right? It's just that your sojourn in the material world is without any beginning. So in order to help you get a sense of, but I do have a relationship, there's the idea of time immemorial. It means you can't remember how long ago it happened. But when you read Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, I think it's 10:22, it says clearly, Anadi Avidya Yuktasha Purusha Shaveratmanam, the jiva's connection with Maya is anadikal. Literally anadikal means without any beginning. Right? So, the idea that free will is powerful enough or independent enough that it can give genesis to feelings like envy are just not siddhanta. It's just not siddhanta in terms of being in the spiritual world, in a relationship with Krishna, and a feeling of envy arises. Because in the spiritual world, we've already mentioned that one has no influence of the energy of avidya or ignorance, right? And envy is one of those feelings. So in the spiritual world, there is no illusion, so that feeling could not arise. Secondly, Rupa Goswami Pad has clearly mentioned Savata Donksharahitam Yad Api Dongshakarane, that the relationship with Krishna is unbreakable in terms of when Prem or Swarup Shakti descends to the jiva, or for those who are Nitya Siddha, who've always been imbued with Swarup Shakti, their Prem Seva is unbreakable. Right? Even if a cause arose to break the love, Yadapi Dosha Karane, it still does not break. Rather, Yad Bhava Bandhano, it becomes stronger. Example, when Krishna in Prakat Lila goes to Mathura and to Dwarka, it would be a reason why, due to the overwhelming amount of pain and separation and so forth, that a love could be broken. Krishna is not the dharmic wedded husband of the gopis, so there's no sense, even though he's told on the chariot of Akrura, he mentioned, I will return. But there is no obligation to return, because he's not married to gopis, anything, there's no obligation. So Krishna going and staying for such a long time in Mathura and Dwarka could give rise to a hopelessness. He says, okay, he's not coming back, we should move on. But it does not happen. Rather, in the depth of their separation, their love becomes stronger. You understand? So there is no means to break love in the spiritual realm. Secondly, the idea that envy could arise. So in Ujjal Nilamani, a example of the Priyanarma Sakhas is given. That when Krishna has association with the gopis, to a certain degree, the Priyanarma Sakhas, Sakhi Bhava Sita, they take shelter. Sakhi Bhav here means, I don't want to make it complicated. Sakhi Bhav means, though the Priyanarma Sakhas have Purush Bhav, it means they are also in male form in the spiritual world, they take shelter of Sakhi Bhav, or the mood, like Sakhis, because they have Anumodata. Anumodata means they have no independent desire to enjoy. Their happiness comes in seeing Krishna having happiness with the gopis. They have no independent desire for their own happiness. So now in the material world, it's very unheard of to find a situation where any group of young men can associate with a group of young ladies, and all the young men will only want that one of the young men should enjoy happiness and they should not. You don't find a situation like that. Certainly, if that was the case in the material world, it could be a cause for the arising of envy. Maybe one gentleman is more handsome or wealthier or whatever the case is, but those elements could give rise to envy. But in the spiritual world, the very nature of the Sakya Rasa, especially Priyanarma Sakhas, in this case, their feeling of wanting Krishna to be happy is so overwhelming that their own Purush Bhav becomes hidden. It means their own male mood becomes hidden, and they have an overwhelming feeling of Anumodata, or the desire to see Krishna's happiness in relation to gopis. So here is an ideal situation where envy could arise, if envy actually had any footing in the spiritual world to cause the jiva to misuse their free will by it. That is certainly a circumstances where that could happen. But it does not. Rather, it nourishes their Sakya Bhav towards Krishna. So the idea of free will is not something that is an independent genesis or cause for the jiva to turn away from Krishna. In the spiritual world, the free will of the jiva is a samagri element. It means it is a part of the natural mood of loving Krishna, and that free will gives rise under the influence of Swarup Shakti to so many varieties of free will to serve Krishna. It never gives the indication of being adverse to Krishna. So we need to understand this clearly. Secondly, the free will, when it comes under the influence of Apara Shakti or Avidya, then it becomes misused, because even though Krishna is present with the jiva as the Paramatma, the jiva remains, Krishna say, Buli Jiv, Anadi Bahiramuk. The jiva remains turned away from the Paramatma, even though the Paramatma is present with the jiva in the heart throughout their sojourn in the material world. The jiva remains turned away from the super soul. This is the meaning of being turned away from Krishna. It doesn't mean in the spiritual world. Krishna expands himself, and expands is obviously the first Baladev, then Mula Shankarshan, Chattovyuha, Mahasankarshan, Purusha avatars, Karanodakshai Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and then Kshirodakshai Vishnu, or Antaryami, or Super Soul. Jiva Goswami says the Jivas are Paramamaika Seshitva, means they are one manifestation in the category of Jiva Tattva from Paramatma. So from time without any beginning, they have been Krishna Buli say Jiv Anari Bahir Mukta. They've been Bahir Mukta Paramatma. So it's not that their genesis of any kind of Vaimukata or being Bahir Mukha turned away was generated in the divine realm. So, and really if you look closely, our acharyas will only speak very specifically to address a doubt or a confusion in any disciple in order to help them. So to digest the entire Tattva Siddhanta Vichar of all these things, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in 15th chapter Jaiva Dharma, because the jivas are pramad. Pramad means always absorbed in so many different things, they cannot concentrate easily. Then, and he's speaking this as a norm. They cannot concentrate easily. Then sometimes a more simple narrative is given to generate an impression in the heart of the jiva of their relationship with Krishna, their present condition of being adverse, and the need to practice bhakti to reconcile that. So this becomes a simple narrative in order to create that situation. But the problem or issue arises is if in the course of the practice of bhakti, then the devotee continues this narrative and then starts to accept it as a Siddhantic fact. Then it can become actually adverse to helping the devotee progress in bhakti. Because then many kinds of apasiddhantic considerations would come, like illusion can exist in the spiritual world, or like envy of God can take place directly in his own abode, in his presence, in a relationship with him. And we just don't have any sastra praman for such things. So I hope this answered the question of the devotee I'm not mentioning by name, the devotee who asked the question, or she. I'm not mentioning directly by name, but hopefully this answers the question about free will and the jiva and what is the nature of that free will, and whether it has the ability for them to generate envy in the spiritual realm in relation to Krishna and cause them to fall, right? So I hope it's digestible so that devotees are not confused that, oh, well, you know, is Mukunda Prabhu going against what our acharyas have said? No, not at all. I'm only asking and begging that perspective is given so you can understand why our acharyas have taught the way they taught and that there is no fault in it whatsoever, right? But at the same time, the need to understand the nature of the Siddhanta and why they have elected to speak from Siddhanta in such a way to help the jivas. So this was the purpose of answering that question. So my Dandavat Pranam, I'm begging any devotees, especially any senior devotees, to make any correction if I've said anything that was incorrect or wrong. All right, my Dandavat Pranam to all devotees. Jai Radhe Radhe.